Well, welcome everybody to the HireMyVA Team and Business Building Podcast, where we help you to reclaim your freedom through hiring and thriving with virtual assistants without breaking the bank, without breaking your bank. I'm Dave Braun, and I'm here with my partner and good and great friend, Larry Broughton. Hey, Larry.
Good and great.
Good and great. There's a difference, but you're both, man.
Yeah, Dave, it is good to see you again. This is part 2 of this podcast. But before that, thank you for being my friend. Thanks for being my partner. Man, I just honestly, I was telling a friend this the other day. I can't imagine life without you in it these days. You're one of those most loyal people I've known through thick and thin. So thank you so much, brother, for my life is better because you're in it. So
Thanks,
there you
Larry.
have it.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. And the same goes for me, man. And Larry, you wouldn't even believe how many, and I don't think I tell you this, but just being on the podcast with you, I'm learning things every time.
Yeah, me too.
And our Wednesday night meetings.
Yeah.
I'm not the person today that I was years ago, and a lot of that's due to you. So.
Oh, thanks, brother. Thanks. All right. So enough of the love fest. Yeah. Okay.
whoa. Let's keep going with the love fest. That's our theme for 2021.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. Well, my friends, thank you for joining us here on this. This is part 2 of a podcast that we started earlier. We're really reflecting on 2020. What are the lessons that we learned there? And so if you're kind of just finding this one, go back and listen to part 1 of this. But this has to do with the whole health spider graph. That tool that I developed a bunch of years ago that Dave has then, once we became business partners, it really helped me hone and develop and really flesh out to this great, amazing tool that it is today. And what we've realized is that measuring quote unquote success on 8 different spans of life help us have a more balanced, rewarding life than just focusing on what's my bottom line look like? Because truly life begins beyond the bottom line, right? And so the 8 spans that we talk about here are physical, financial, professional, leisure and fun, that's grouped together, mental, spiritual, family, and friends. In part 1, Dave, we talked about physical, financial, professional, and leisure. And I think we hit a lot of really good elements in that. So I hope people will go back and listen to that if they've not heard it. But what I'd like to do, Dave, is talk about what are the lessons we learned in 2020 in the categories of mental, spiritual, family, and friends. And like I said in the earlier podcast, in part 1 of this, is I'm not one who likes to look in the rearview mirror, but if we're going to set smart goals for our future, and whether you're somebody who sets, this is the time of year when people are setting goals for the next year, whether you're one of those people who sets annual 12-month goals, or you're one of those people who sets micro goals for the next 12 days, or you're somebody that does 12-week goals, you can't set effective goals if you don't at least do some reflection on the trends that have happened in the past, right?
That's right.
And so we're going to take a little bit of time, talk about what are the lessons we learned in 2020 and how can we improve just by analyzing it, staring our navel a little bit, what the next year might look like. Anything you want to add onto that, Dave, before we jump in?
Other than just like you said, re-emphasize, please go back and listen to the first part of this episode, the beginning part for sure, where Larry, you explain real well what the spider graph is like and the balance, how to figure this stuff out, right? So
and for those that are listening, we actually show, and if you're watching, we actually pulled up what a copy of the spider graph looks like. Yeah.
Right.
So Dave, let's kind of jump into this. I guess this would be the 5th span. Is that right? 5th span of the spider graph would be mental health. Because again, we're trying to measure the whole health of beings, right? Because we're not just a financial being, we're a physical being. There's a financial element to our life. There's just our professional life. Gallup says that, most people are disengaged because they're not being professionally developed, right? Leisure and fun is important. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, according to The Shining, right? Creepy. We just lived through that. But then the next span is mental health. So what is a lesson you might have learned about mental health in this past year?
So one of the things that I had done before, of course, the pandemic is I was pretty clear and mentally on what my sanctuaries were.
No,
And I would
such a great
define
word.
sanctuaries as how most of you would, is that places where you feel safe, that energize you, that when you have maybe tough things happening outside of those places, you can go back into and recharge. They're a source of comfort for you, familiarity, that kind of thing. So I think it's important for us to identify what those are. Um, and one of the things I did is I had defined three of them. Well, one was church, and the other one was the gym, and we talked a little bit about that in the other episode.
Right.
And the third one was my home, and we had worked to make my home a physical home, and of course the environment
Beautiful.
that we've created
Mm-hmm.
something that is a good and safe place for us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my overall faith, Larry, are Christians. My overall
Mm-hmm.
faith is a sanctuary in a way that can't be taken away from me. But these other sanctuaries are kind of like a physical in a way, right? The church, what I mean, is the physical building where we'd go to worship, and the gym, physical, and my physical home.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening though is when the pandemic started is close the gym and close the church. So all the worship had to be done online. And so I lost two of my three sanctuaries. But the great thing is I still had my home.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a lesson that really got embedded in me, is that, I'm glad I had those three sanctuaries, three different ones, because, those other ones the chances are you're not going to lose all of them at once, right? But it's important to have multiple ones that you can rely on and fall back on, um, to help when things are going crazy, at least from a mental perspective.
Well, I like that you intentionally identify them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And isn't it amazing? You guys did this beautiful renovation on your home just prior to this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a great thing, right? Imagine, trying to struggle through all these other things, you know. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's good. I'm
Yeah. That was one. So that was one of them.
good.
Another
What
one
else?
was related to that is, you can see my office in the background. Part of the renovation was my office. I got my bookshelves, my patents up there,
Mm-hmm.
like my little wall of fame. And you notice over here, I got my whiteboards. And so I have a
Yes.
nice office environment that I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy being in.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's a lesson and I've worked since then, to make sure I, clean it up and do a couple of things to make it as best as it can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. You have a
I
great
think that's an
workspace for
important
sure.
thing, is
Yeah.
to make sure you've got a good environment that you're working in,
Yeah.
that you want to go in. All right.
Right.
Because there are times when you're just going to be like, I just don't want to work. But if
Yeah.
your environment is inviting and you want to go there, it really will help.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the second thing. And then the third thing, and we can talk about this, is I got into the cycle like everybody else probably did, that started watching and reading the news all the time. I
Yeah.
take a break, I try to work in 90-minute chunks, and then I
Right.
take a 15-minute break. I'd be spending my 15-minute breaks checking the news.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, that was just killing me. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I learned is, it's important to watch the news and whatever sources you want, but make sure you limit it to an appropriate amount. If
Yes.
you're on it constantly, we had some friends who were watching, one of the news channels like 2 or 3 hours a day, and they just had to almost do a fast from it. And I think, Larry, you had talked about you were doing a fast from any of the news stuff for a while too.
So I am. Yeah. Let me jump into that then. Yes. I think we have to protect our mental health like we're
Mm-hmm.
protecting our home or a family member. I mean, with diligence, like willing to put your fist up,
Yeah.
to protect it. Because the garbage that goes in, can get in there and ferment and get even worse, right? So yes, I've been on an intentional news fast for months at this point, and I've got a couple of friends who are one leans one way politically, one leans the other way politically, and were always sending me, I'm just going to use the word just to be dramatic, garbage.
Yeah.
Um, And so it was, I always felt tension. Now my old life, I loved that. I mean, some of you folks know that I went to school for political science. I studied political science. At one point in my life, I mean, some of you know I've been kind of drafted. People wanted me to run for congressional offices before. I used to feel like I had to be the first person who knew the news. I was the guy who people were coming, you've done this, used to ask me, like, what's going on politically? What do you think about this? So that was a very hard thing for me to break through. But I realized several years ago, Dave, when I was, got involved doing these flashpoints from one of the books that you and I worked on, is that one of the flashpoints that I sent out years ago, and I don't even think it made it to the book, was talked about the negativity that's in our brains all the time, right? About if someone else talked to us the way we often talk to ourselves, we'd slap them, right? And that's how militant I want us to be about looking at this negativity that goes into our brain. And so I went on a very intentional fast. I didn't want negative people or negative stuff going in here. And part of the Ugozi program a while, I don't know, it's been a couple of years now, you and I shot a video on what we call brain flushing.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
About the way to get the negative chatter that's in your head out is by replacing it with positive stuff, right? This is why we wrote flashpoints. This is why we believe so strongly in a morning routine. Before you check email, before you get on social media, that you put good stuff into your brain, beautiful music, great reading, some meditation, because the truth is, particularly in this difficult time that we're in right now and going through, is that suicides are way up and not enough people are talking about it. Overdoses are way up. People who have been clean and sober for a long time have fallen off the wagon, right? We hear I think it was 37% of people who had some level of sobriety have lost their sobriety in the past few months. So I think it's really important that we take mental health seriously. Now, whether that means that you find an accountability partner, a prayer partner, a meditation partner, hire a mental health professional. The great thing now, one of the great things that have come out of this is that online mental health you can get now, right? You can do Zoom. Now, it's not the same as being in someone's office necessarily, but it's the next best thing. Sure. There are secure video conferencing that you can do with a mental health professional. There really is no excuse anymore. And finances aren't even an excuse anymore because so many people are doing pro bono stuff, right? But it's the way that we look at our mental health. It has to be a priority. And for me, Dave, it starts with gratitude. It absolutely starts with gratitude. And it's kind of a biblical thing, I suppose, but no matter what is going on, even when the storm is raging, there are things to be grateful for. Yes. And sometimes we have to search for them, for sure. But saying them out loud or writing them down and getting intentional about being aware of them is so helpful. We try to do certainly our morning stand-ups in our companies. We do, every person has to say what they're grateful for. Before they talk about what their goals are for the day and what they accomplished the day before, they have to say what they're grateful for, right?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, gratitude and anxiety cannot live in the same space at the same time. Gratitude and anxiety can't live in the same space at the same time.
That's right.
So I think that we have to focus on gratitude a whole lot more. And when we do that, I think it is as tough as it is. Listen, I have been in some really ugly shit in my life. But a lot of it is right up here.
Yeah, we all have.
Some of the ugliest stuff is right up here between my ears, right? The mental part of it. So I want us listen, the entrepreneurial journey is one of the most difficult journeys you'll ever be on in your life. That's just a fact. If we're easy, everyone would be doing it. Okay.
That's for sure.
So make it a priority. Okay. Go to YouTube, type in Larry Broughton brain flushing. You can go to our Ugoji store. There's a book there called Flashpoints, or go to wherever you buy a book, whether you go to Walmart or Amazon, it's there. Oh, are you on the
I'm
Ugoji
sharing it
site?
right now.
Yeah, there you go. The importance of brain flushing.
Yeah,
There
you
you
can
go.
just search for flushing right in our search box, and it
There you
pops
go.
up, and it's a nice transcript here as well. But you can
Yeah,
watch the video here. We recommend watching the video because it's a
it's
really
a nice
good
visual.
demonstration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So I think, Dave, that is mental. Anything else on mental before we switch to the spiritual?
No, other than I guess there's one thing it just popped into my mind. One of the things
Hmm?
that I started doing is that I've done over the years a bunch of business book summaries, right?
Yes. Oh
Mm.
gosh, and they're good ones, by the way.
Yeah, and they're kind of more than
Great.
summaries, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Kinda
yeah,
long,
yeah,
but
yeah. They're more like novellas.
but what I have is that they're in my Evernote, and I'm like, I got a new Kindle. I'm thinking, can I get my book summaries onto my Kindle?
Mhm.
And so figured out a way to do it. Just create a Word document, and there's an app you can download it, essentially have them on the
Mhm.
Kindle. And so in the evening, what I've started doing before going to bed most nights is I'll bring up one of them and I'll just start thumbing through it, one of my summaries, to kind
Yeah,
of remember some of the stuff that I've learned. And
yeah.
so I'm filling, before I go to bed, my brain with some good learnings and positive
Positive
stuff.
stuff.
And
Yeah,
it's made a difference. It really has.
yeah. Right. And the way the brain works is that stuff that you have just got through reading, it's filing and processing that while you sleep. Right. This
Mm.
is why you should not be watching movies like Full Metal Jacket before you go to bed. You should not be watching the news before you go to bed. Okay. You need to
Dang,
wind
that's
the
what
brain
happened
down.
last night. I watched like Alien and Terminator. Entirely.
Exactly. Exactly. All right.
Uh,
Well, good.
okay,
All right. Let's
spiritual.
shift gears here and go into the spiritual span. What have you learned spiritually in the past year, David?
Well, I think especially we are built for community, right?
Oh my gosh.
We're
Yes.
God created to be in community with other folks, and this pandemic just kind of tore that apart.
Yes.
And so what I learned is even more so now, but to always push to be in community, and you may have to create it or recreate it as needed, and to be diligent on it. So I think, Larry, maybe we can talk a little bit about our men's group, but that's one of the things that you, me, and a couple of other folks got together.
Mhm.
It was in the fall, and said, man, we're just missing some guy time together. And so we recreated a community that had fallen apart, and we recreated it in a new way, a
Right.
better way.
Right.
But we recreated it because we were all missing it. And I tell you, Larry, since doing that, it's made such a difference. So where we get together, us guys, once a week.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the lesson that I learned, is the importance of community, and to almost kind of force it in a way.
Yeah.
Set up a system or environment where you're forced to be in community, if that makes sense. Because as we talk about, we are creatures of isolation. Left to our own devices, we'll just isolate, especially
Right.
men. And I know I will. And if
Yeah.
you're that kind of person, you've really gotta force it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the forced part, I think one of the lessons I've learned and had to learn over and over again over the years since I've become a Christian is that leading up to our Wednesday group, I don't want to go. I come up with a million
No,
reasons why I don't want to be there.
no,
And then I get there and realize this is exactly what I needed. Now, listen, Dave, you're a Christian. I'm a Christian. Do I wish, there were more Christians? Of course, but I want people to have a spiritual walk with
right.
whoever your creator is, whether you use the word Gaia or God or Yahweh or whatever it is. I've been in enough recovery programs to know that we have to surrender our lives to some higher power, because we don't listen. We are a speck on the darn timeline
Right.
of
We are.
existence, right? And when we realized that we really can't control it all, that was a hard thing for me.
Mm.
you know, coming to faith and just getting so clean and sober, and is realizing I can't control everything. There are some things I just have to let go,
Yeah.
right? Which has
Hmm.
been a very difficult thing for me during this pandemic, Dave, right? Is that I know that, we're busting our humps, but I want to control everything. And surrendering is a very difficult thing to do. I used to think that surrender was a sign of weakness. If I let somebody else deal with this stuff, that's I'm surrendering and giving up. But surrender is like vulnerability. It takes courage to do this in the right environment, right?
Yes.
Um, and knowing that things are going to work out, that the universe, God, Gaia is conspiring for greatness for us. Um, I have to remind myself of that every day,
Hmm.
several times a day, right? Because it's just I'm in the business arena with people who are dealing with multi-million dollar assets, tens of millions of dollars worth of individual assets, right? And so pressure, the temperature is high, and it's easy to get into the weeds and think that, well, if I, Larry, can just control the situation, I'm going to make it better. But sometimes the best thing we can do is just say, I can just do the best that I can do and surrender,
Yeah.
everything to your higher power.
Yep.
But I think the good point that was my learning thing too, Dave, is that if we can do that first of all, the surrender, accept that, there's a higher power out there. For me, it's God and my Savior. Um, but two, get intentional about surrounding yourself with people who are going to be on that journey. In our group, we call it a Silas, somebody who's going to go on the journey with you,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's a tough journey.
It is
It's a tough journey, right?
not easy.
And so let's go on. Let's go on it together sometime. There's a saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team, right? I'd rather go far.
Oh,
This is
me too. Yeah.
life's a marathon.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah. So that's kind of like sometimes some of these things in these areas are just like you said, not going to be easy, and we have to really push to do it.
yeah,
And it helps when you've got other people traveling on the journey with you. It
yeah,
really
for
does.
sure, for sure. All right. So, Dave, at this point, we've done physical in part one. We did financial, professional, and leisure in part one. We're now in part two. We've talked about mental and spiritual. We're hitting the halfway point. Now we have family. Then we're going to do fun. So, what'd you learn about family during the past year?
So what I learned about family was, oh my gosh, I think everybody is going to identify with this. Is you got to, how do I say this? You got to understand that if you talk politics with your family, you need to understand if they can handle it. Otherwise, do not, because there's lots of folks out there. I mean, this is kind of friends too, but it's even more so with family, because you can choose your friends, but you really don't choose your family. You got to understand if you can really talk politics or not, or bring that stuff up, because otherwise, do not. A lot of people can't handle the disagreement. We've got some friends who are on one side of the aisle, and their brother and dad and all that are on the other side of the aisle, and they they just don't hardly talk to each other. Their relationship as a family is fractured because of that. Now, from my family, on my side of the family, I'm on one side more or less, and then um, some other folks in my family are on another side. And every now and then we've talked about politics,
Yeah,
and sometimes it gets heated. But overall, we've got this. Uh, this overall arch over our relationship that's love. And so we love each other and we forgive each other, and we're good, and we don't talk very much about it because we realize we're not going to change each other's mind. But it's so important from a family perspective. You got to understand if you can talk politics with them or not. If you can't, just don't bring it up, because it's just, it's not worth them. There was a one of my friends at the gym. He had a his niece. had his grandniece. He never even gets to see his grandniece anymore because they're so divided between them politically.
Yeah.
The resentment is there so much. And so that's one of the things that a big lesson that I learned is just really, really, really be careful when you're talking politics with family.
That's good. To do that, however, and the realization I've had in this past year is that um, the realization of the value of a high EQ,
Yeah.
emotional quotient. You can't do what you just got through saying if you got a low emotional quotient.
All right. You're right.
You've got to really be aware, right? And if you what's an EQ? Um, there's a book called Emotional. It's by Daniel Goldberg. I can't remember the Goldberg or Goldburn. Emotional intelligence. It's called, and it measures. He started studying who were all the salutatorians and valedictorians in school and whatever happened to them. Well, what they found was if they had a high IQ and a low EQ, emotional quotient, they didn't go very far. They lived these light gray lives of mediocrity. But the people who were out there who were the titans of industry, the people who were change makers in the world, they were people who may not have had a high IQ, but they got along with people. They could read people. They saw potential in people. They encouraged people. Those were people who, actually were making a difference in the world. The great thing is you can learn tools to boost
Yeah.
your EQ, right? And so it's not like if you got low EQ, that's the end of it. You actually can learn. Just like IQ, there's some things you can do about IQ that can give you add 10 points to your IQ as well. So that I'm glad that you learned that, Dave. Some of the things for me on family is, as silly as this might sound, is just the value of
No,
family.
that's not silly.
Both my parents passed away several years ago. I've got an older brother who passed away, when he was 36. I do have a twin brother. I got a couple of siblings, but I live here on the West Coast. The rest of my family, quote unquote, lives on the East Coast, right? With the exception of my children who are here, and so I recognize that, like you're probably going to hear a recurring theme here, and that is the intentionality of building relationships
Yes.
with people. With my daughter off at college early in the year, and then actually coming back home and living with me while she was attending college and university online was a challenge, for her, which meant it was going to be a challenge for me because I had to be an encourager, right, and talk her through things. And I've got a 16-year-old son, almost 17. The challenges that come with, you were a teenage boy once, Dave. Wasn't that an easy road? Right?
Yeah, like about 5 years ago.
Right. And so the lesson I learned there was, actually, it's a lesson I applied to any human interaction, but particularly in the family, was this. You ready for this? This is a writer downer.
Okay.
Offer grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often. Offer grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often. Because when I am able to do that with my family members, particularly like these political talks that come up, Dave, when you offer grace and you offer forgiveness, because somebody's feelings are going to get hurt, but you offer it out of love over and over again, the wounds heal much more quickly. It's like putting a salve on a wound, right? And it's soft. I realize that whenever I think I'm going to go into a prickly conversation with a family member, if I go into it with this, reminding myself, TFTR, Larry, thanks for the reminder, offer grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often. I tend to approach everybody with my hands open and not with my fist up. Because don't you have a family member where you're like, you're going to the function and you know that family member is going to be there, and you can feel a tension start to build in your shoulders, right? So that's kind of one of the things that I've learned when it comes to family is just love first. How about that? How about we start and love first? Because I think the sad part, Dave, and the lesson I realized over the past year is that it's easy to get angry with family members, or easier to get angry with family members than it is with friends, because they're always going to be there.
Yes. Yep.
Well, guess what? They
They
might
are.
not always be there.
That's right. Yep, they are.
I've lost family members very quickly
Hmm.
before, and we've seen divorces happen, right?
Yeah.
So don't think that just because you're married to this person that you can abuse them. Okay, love them, treat them with dignity, treat them with respect, um, treat them as if they're someone you actually love.
Hmm.
How about
Yeah,
that? You
I
know,
agree. Agree
yeah.
totally.
All right. Anything else about family, Dave?
No, that's good.
All
That's
right.
good.
Well, good. All right. So here in part two, we've talked so far about mental, spiritual family, and the last one is friends. This is for me is one of the
Friends.
most important ones, as I just described. I don't have a lot of family around me. I have more friends around me than I do family. So, Dave, what did you learn about friends in the past year?
One of the things that I've learned is that I I want to embrace more the person. I want to be more of the person who is the one that is the first to reach out,
Oh, yeah.
and don't resent people if they don't. So vulnerability and stuff. My mom is 87 and she's doing okay,
Yeah.
but sometimes she will resent if people don't reach out to her. And the thing is, people just aren't thinking about other people very much. They're thinking more about themselves. And so I can't be the one to sit back and think, oh, people need to reach out to me. I don't matter to them because they didn't say anything. So, I mean, here's what happened on Christmas day. Normally, I have a bunch of people that I'll text Merry Christmas to and stuff. And it was about 10 o'clock or whatever. Nobody texted me. Well, I could have taken the attitude of, oh man, they're not thinking about me. They must not love me anymore. Screw them, F them, all that stuff, right? But instead, I said, I'm going to reach out. Um, and so I did. And then we started having some good conversations with people. So that's, I want to be the person that is the one willing to reach out and not resenting if other people don't. It's just, I just don't want to go there anymore. I had
Yeah.
another friend who we had talked about in the past, that he's like, I just don't know if my friends are any good, because I'm always the one that reaches out, for the conversations to help and do things.
Yeah.
And he was starting to resent that. But I know how rich his life is by him reaching out and initiating the contact with folks,
Yeah.
because it's not about that they're not willing to do it. People just don't, a lot of people don't think about it. And it's kind of what we talked about before. We tend to, a lot of us want to just isolate, and we don't do it for whatever reason. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go into 2021 and being intentional to reach out more. Also, as you know, my cousin died just recently,
Yes. Jeez.
right? And so
Yeah.
she was more or less the one. She was the one who reached out to me. We'd been texting each other, and that's one of the things that I want everybody to embrace technology, because it allows us to stay connected more so than ever before.
Yeah.
We just have to be willing to use it right. But she was texting me back and forth, and so we had a pretty good relation. She was family, but relationship, but she was more friend. And she reached out to me a lot, and I'm so thankful that
Yeah.
she did.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like you just had talked about family being gone, she's gone now. And
Yeah.
so there was no way at this point for me to establish that relationship. Thank goodness. I'm so glad that she did, because now
Yeah.
I'm closer to her husband, I'm closer to her daughters because of all of that.
Yeah.
So I want to reach out more to others, be the first to reach out.
That's a good one. So you reflected, and now you're getting intentional about you're going to reach out more
Yeah.
in 2021. That's really good, Dave. Well, one of the realizations I've had in the past year, and I know that it's kind of late in my life to be realizing this, and I know it intellectually, but I don't always own it in here in the heart area,
Yeah.
is that just because someone's not reaching out doesn't mean that they don't love you.
That's
Right.
exactly.
The truth is our priorities aren't the same as everyone else's priorities.
Yes.
They're just not.
Yes.
Right. And we don't know what struggles they're dealing with that day. It's not that they've not thought about you. It might be that something has distracted them from reaching out. Right.
Yes.
And then, we've all had it happen. So this is the part about offering grace, patience, and forgiveness freely and often.
Yes.
right? Let's go through life with our friends, um, expecting that they are well-meaning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I think it is a good thing. For me, the other lesson this year is I've gotten much more selective about who I'm calling friend, who I'm calling brother,
True.
and
Yeah.
who I'm sharing things with. Because truth be told, I had some folks who I thought were friends
Mm.
when this pandemic hit who said some rather nasty things.
Oh.
Even though I offered patience and grace and forgiveness, and I went back and asked them about it, I realized I don't need that kind of negativity
Sure.
in
Yeah, I
my
agree.
life. I want someone who believes in me, who loves me, who sees the goodness in me, and not what they can get from me. That
Mm.
kind of was that was a awakening this this past year for me. And have decided I've always been one of those people who I know a lot of people. I do. I know a lot of people,
Yeah.
but I don't I have a close group. They're pretty tight. I don't mind. I don't care if that group gets even smaller, but I'd rather have a few deep people in my life than hanger-oners. And I choose not that. I'm going to be much more selective moving into 2021 than I have in the past about who I call friends. It's even in this call a couple of times, or in this I've mentioned, well, I wouldn't call them a friend. We've not talked in a long time, right? We're more acquaintances or associates or whatever, right? To me, friend is a very powerful word. Very
Uh,
powerful word. I think we diminish friends way too much. I mean, I hear it all the time. And particularly with social media, I've got this one person in my life in particular. My dear friend is like, okay, you've met that person once. You got a picture with them. Your dear friend, really?
yeah.
you know. So I'm just going to be more careful about who I call friend.
Yeah. That's that's
Forward.
that's good. And well, Larry, that's good self-awareness on your part to know, what you want out of your friend relationships
Yes.
and how you're built, and you want to go deep with a few. Other
Yeah.
folks are like, yeah, I want to go deep with a few, but I want to have the wide group of folks as well. And they're good at it. They're good at it. But they
I
know themselves that they can be relatively good at it.
Well, I'll tell you this, life has been a journey for all of us, but for me, you know my story, Dave, and I had to get intentional years ago about if I wanted to change. I used to have a lot of friends, and I didn't have not one that I had a deep relationship with.
Yeah.
Not one really knew the real me, you know. So I look at friends to me are battle buddies. There's somebody who's got your back, and I've got your back.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how I'm choosing to look at it for 2021.
Cool.
So so with
Well,
that, folks, we hit all 8 of
yeah.
these, right? Physical, financial, professional, leisure, and fun. On the first part of this, go back and listen to that if you didn't catch it. On this part, we hit mental, spiritual, family, and friends. So I hope that you got some stuff out of this, and you were able to reflect on 2020 with Dave and I as well. But now that you've reflected, let's get intentional about what are we actually going to do
Yeah.
2021, right? And if you're part of the tribe and you've got access to this whole health spider graph, this is your reminder. TFTR, my friends, pull out
Mhm.
that whole health spider graph and to start measuring your life on this. And what's measured is improved, right?
Yes.
Dave, what say you?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I totally agree with that, of course. Yeah, it's important to do the right balance of looking back, but looking back not to punish yourself, but only to learn and to take those lessons forward. Um,
Good.
because I think also until we learn the lessons we need to learn, we're just going to have to repeat them.
Yeah.
And so you do yourself a
Ouch.
favor if you can look back and see, okay, where have I fallen short, and what am I going to do about it? Right? How am
Yeah.
I going to change? So I think, yeah, 2020 was just the craziest year. A lot of great
Yeah.
things happened, but a lot of bad things have happened as well. But I think
Yeah.
I think if I could put my little bow on it, one of the things that I want to do going
Hmm.
forward is make sure I manage my perspective appropriately on everything.
That's
Have the
correct.
right perspective.
Perspective is key.
Yeah.
That's right. We should
All
do
right.
a podcast just on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that. Maybe that's going to be the next one.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, for being with us. Larry and I have talked a long time on these couple of episodes. It's been
Yes.
fun, though. It's really helped both of us, I think, process
Yes.
what we've gone through, and it's helping us set up ourselves for 2021 even better. But thank you guys for being
Yeah.
here with us. And remember, building a team is the way to reclaim your freedom. It's the way to really move through these areas of the spider graph, like we talked about. It can help you make leaps and bounds if you have a team around you to help you do that. And part of that team is us. We are here to help you.
Yes.
But what we'd love for you to do right now is three things. Go and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so. And then number two, give us a rating, preferably 5 stars. And then number three is go to HireMyVA.com for more information on our course and community. Remember, even without experience, you'll learn how to prepare for, hire, and thrive with virtual assistants. And Larry and I have helped a lot of folks. We're helping
Yes.
folks now. We'd love to help you too. So just go to HireMyVA.com for more information.
That's right, folks. Remember, one of the most important parts of this program is the community forum that we have. Go there, dive deep with some of those folks. I know there are
Yes.
a lot of our members in there who love helping other people on their journey, and it doesn't just have to be with hiring your VA. There are people that are in the program who have said that their lives have been transformed by working with us and working with being in this mastermind, being in this tribe. So it's a great resource for everybody. But do yourself a favor, do the world a favor, do something truly significant today. All right, folks, go get them.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.